So this post-break session, as you know, is entitled Lebanon's Economic Crisis by Sector, Challenges and Opportunities in Manufacturing, and is moderated by Dr. Leila Dagher. So please allow me to introduce Dr. Dagher before turning the floor to her and to our panelists. Dr. Leila Dagher is Assistant to the President for Public Policy and Associate Professor of Economics at the Lebanese American University, and has been an adjunct lecturer at the George Washington University since 2016. She currently serves as an editor for energy policy, as well as on the editorial boards for finance, research letters, and utilities policy. Dr. Dagher is a senior fellow at the Lebanese Center for Policy Studies, a research fellow at the Economic Research Forum, and serves on the steering committee of the Mashriq Gender Facility. She has previously served in various capacities, including economic advisor to several public officials, director of the Institute of Financial Economics at the American University of Beirut, and chairperson of the Department of Economics. Dr. Dagher is a regular participant in academic and policy debates. Her research applies her econometric knowledge to the areas of energy, environmental, and financial economics, with a focus on producing policy-relevant studies. She has published more than 25 peer-reviewed articles. Her work has appeared in leading academic journals such as the Energy Journal Resource Policy, Energy Economics, and in more widely accessible forums. Dr. Dagher received her Bachelor of Engineering from the American University of Beirut and her PhD in Mineral Economics from the Colorado School of Mines. Before joining the LAU, Dr. Dagher had taught for 15 years at the AUB, with several visiting stints, including Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and the Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Leila, it's great to see you, to have you with us.
Thank you.
And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Makram. Thank you for the warm welcoming words. I'm happy to be here, and I'm very honored to be affiliated with the LCPS for the second year now. So this session is about the crisis effect on the manufacturing sector. We will start with a presentation by Drs. Lina Maddah and Dr. Bassel Maddah. I'll be introducing them first. They will go ahead with their presentation, and then we'll be discussing the sector. So Dr. Lina, I think this is the second time around you're being introduced. She's a senior economic researcher at the LCPS and adjunct professor at the Department of Economics at the Lebanese American University. Dr. Maddah holds a PhD in economics from Universitat Rovira i Virgili in Spain and was awarded the Marie Sklodowska-Curie Fellowship. Prior to joining LAU, Lina was a visiting scholar at the Regional Economics Applications Laboratory at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, USA, and a visiting researcher at the Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Venice, Italy. Her areas of work include urban and regional economics, spatial economic analysis, and cultural and creative industries. Dr. Bassel Maddah is a professor and the inaugural chairperson in the Industrial Engineering and Management Department at AUB. His research interests are in retailing, supply chain management, and stochastic processes. His research is published in leading journals specialized in operations research and management science. He also consults with the industry and provides professional training. So, as I said, both co-authors will be presenting their policy brief on the manufacturing sector. Thank you.
So, thank you for having me. I would like to thank LCPS and FNF for funding the event and this project. It was an interesting project to work on. I'm from the generation of industrial engineers who saw manufacturing shifting from the US to China. So I know a little bit about manufacturing, even though my research has been mostly in services. When this opportunity was offered to me, I thought it would be nice to, one, learn about the manufacturing in Lebanon more, and to meet the industrialists, because we had a very nice round table, and to really take a deep dive and try to use some scientific studies or measures to understand the effect of the crisis on an important sector like manufacturing. Essentially, what we found was that manufacturing was hit way before the crisis. I mean, historically, the government did not pay enough attention to manufacturing, and this continued. And interestingly, in the crisis, the manufacturing showed some resilience, and there is even some hope that we could have some new industries kind of reviving because of the crisis. So it's not completely bad news for manufacturing. There is some hope with the basically reduced labor cost, which I don't know how long will it stay because the labor is suffering, and with the reduced in cost compared to the international market, there could be some more opportunities for export. So those were our findings in brief. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to give some background and overview about manufacturing in Lebanon and the economic crisis. Then I'm going to give the floor to Lina, who will talk about challenges faced by manufacturing in the crisis and before, and opportunities. And then Lina will present some policy recommendations, which were inspired by the roundtable we had like a few months ago, actually more, 6 months ago, and by our own literature review that we looked at different sources. Okay, so manufacturing in Lebanon essentially, first I will start by the economic crisis. I mean, almost everybody here knows what's happening. The crisis started in 2016 when the central bank had a shortage of money to kind of finance the corruption machine, yes, rooted in the Lebanese government. And to finance that corruption machine, they created this financial engineering business whereby the banks were giving big deposits at 10% interest, and banks were running the money to the central bank at an interest of more than 15%. This is the crisis in brief. It ended up being like a Ponzi scheme. When the revolution erupted in 2019, there was a run on the banks, and that run on the banks led to the kind of unveiling of the scheme, and until now we're suffering from that. Almost everybody in this room is suffering from this, and I don't think we are out of the tunnel yet. So right now, I mean, it's covered now by that Zoom thing, but we can see that the exchange rate is stable. And already our media, or very enlightened media in Lebanon, are already praising the new central bank governors or deputy governors for stabilizing the currency at that level there. For me, I mean, I'm not there are some very, very good economists in the room, Dr. Dagher and Dr. Maddah, number two. So, but I think in my modest opinion that basically any stabilizing of the currency, as what's happening right now, and that right end of the curve there, is not good news. And these deputy governors, I mean, they are not better than, I'm not going to say more, they're not better than the previous governor, you know. So right now we have a kind of, I don't know, more wasting of the reserves, but I think we're not out of the tunnel yet, and the crisis is not over yet. Okay, so after the financial engineering, we had the Sairafa burst. People were making more money from Sairafa than from their businesses, and that's not healthy. Now the Sairafa is shut down, thank God, but we are not out of the tunnel yet. When we have a normal economy with natural fluctuation of exchange rate reflecting the market, then things will be better. So we're not out of the tunnel yet. And now, for example, we have a war in Gaza and some war in South Lebanon, and the exchange rate is fixed. This is unheard of except in Lebanon. And again, I'm not an economist, but I think that's unhealthy, okay? So that's my take on this. So the crisis, again, was made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic, the port explosion, and by the war in Ukraine, and the rest is history, I guess. Now, in terms of the history of manufacturing in Lebanon, I thought we would look at the history to understand more. And it's interesting that the manufacturing started with the silk industry, like almost 150 years ago in the 19th century. And you can see that in that picture there, some child labor, but we're not going to comment on that. So this is part of the Lebanon's glorious history. So silk industry, and then the silk industry was decommissioned because of substitute material. And somehow during the Great Depression in the US, Lebanese industrials saw an opportunity to buy machines at a low cost, which gave them some boost. And this boost helped them in the Second World War when there was some embargo on imports to Lebanon. But after the Second World War was over, the newly founded Lebanese government did not pay attention to manufacturing. It has always been that Lebanon is strong in services and tourism, which I think is not sustainable, but that's part of the root cause of the problem. And this policy continued. Beginning of the 70s, there was some hope for manufacturers with the influx of capital, but then the war came and wiped that out. The war was over, but after the war, the government continued with this focus on services and tourism. So we're still basically in a situation where the government does not believe in manufacturing very much. And I think if we're going to get out of the financial crisis and become a more sustainable economy, we should focus on productive sectors such as manufacturing and agriculture. And we should have a minimum of these, to have some national sovereignty, and basically to be able to really have some stability. So without some kind of local production, it will always be a problem. In terms of manufacturing in Lebanon, so this picture here shows you the distribution of the different sectors. So it's mostly the food industry, which this is in terms of count of companies and revenues. So most of the revenues come from the food industry, followed by things like chemicals, minerals, metals, and so on. Interestingly, in terms of export, most of the export is from jewelry and machinery. So things like foods are consumed locally. Around 85% of the production is consumed locally, and we export 15%. And our major exports are jewelry and machinery, which was like kind of news to us. Okay. In terms of the percent of GDP, the contribution of manufacturing varies between 12% and 18% over the last 10 years. This has been the variation. Again, there is a shortage of data. I should have mentioned that. It was really hard to find data. This chart here is from a study by the Lebanese Industrial Society in 2015. After that, it's very hard to find reliable studies. There is a recent report by the Jamiat Sinayin, Lebanese industrialist, that have some good numbers. But beyond what the Jamiat Sinayin is doing, there are very few reliable studies. In this report, we hope that we have documented some numbers. I think there's a need. I mean, our exercise showed that there is a need for more documentation of what's happening in manufacturing. So this is the kind of the background. Now, what we also found interesting that the crisis affected manufacturing before the crisis started. So maybe you don't see it here, but this chart shows the decline in revenue between 2015 and 2012. Okay, sorry, between 2012 and 2015. So as BDL enforced this kind of economy based on interest and people found it better to invest money in banks rather than opening businesses, manufacturing suffered. And the revenue from manufacturing dropped from $10.5 billion in 2012 to $8.5 billion in 2015. So this is way before the crisis. Manufacturing was already hit because of the economic policies that did not encourage organic growth. They encouraged people to invest their money in banks, basically. Okay, so this was kind of an early warning. We also looked at what happened in other countries, and the message was mixed from other countries. Some countries like in South America and Africa were very badly hit by economic crisis. So again, what we are looking at here, other countries that had high inflation, hyperinflation, and economic crisis, how did their manufacturing sector deal with the crisis? We saw that, for example, in South America and Africa, it was a big hit. Okay, so for example, in countries like Zimbabwe, half of the manufacturing plants were shut down, and many manufacturers end up taking their money out from manufacturing and putting them in playing with the currency. I mean, trading on the exchange, which we had some things like it happening here. However, in other countries like Chile and Greece, there was good news. The crisis pushed these countries to have new production lines, which we're seeing in Lebanon. Now, in Lebanon, we have some manufacturers making pasta, some manufacturers making whiskey, which is new to us. So also in Lebanon, we saw some of what happened in Chile and Greece. What is common across all the crises is the effect on labor. So it seemed that the weakest link in this is the labor force. And almost all the crises we looked at, and there was a study that we looked at 160 crises in the last 50 years. In all the crises, what happens is that the wages are the things that are hit the most. So this is, for example, in Mexico, the chart there. You see that the wages went down significantly, and then they rebounded, but they are at a level below the crisis, below the beginning of the crisis. In Lebanon right now, it's similar. The wages in manufacturing and other sectors are still low, and something like this is happening. And this is an advantage for the manufacturers. They have a lower labor cost and hard dollars. But I'm not sure how much the manufacturers can sustain this, because this is leading to migration. People are finding better jobs elsewhere. So this is good news in terms of low labor cost, but you need to find those laborers who would accept to have such salaries. So this is the evidence from other countries. Now I'll give the floor to Lina, who will talk about challenges, opportunities, and will give some policy recommendation. Thank you for listening.
Hello again. So I'll be addressing some challenges facing manufacturers. I'll be happy afterwards. Of course, we'll hear the input of manufacturers with us on the panel. So to start with, of course, we need to highlight financial challenges. Given the declining purchase power of the local customer in Lebanon, there was a complete erosion of the salaries of both the private and the public sector after 2019, and a significant hyperinflation and the depreciation of the national currency, of course, have all created vast restraints on the purchasing power of the local customer. We ranked highest in inflation rates globally in 2022. The multiplier effect plunged many Lebanese families into income poverty. According to the UNESCO, an estimated 82% of the total population lived in multidimensional poverty in 2021. And more severely, an assessment on Lebanon's food security phase classification reveals that an estimated of 2 million people in Lebanon, including refugees, were facing food insecurities between September and December 2022. Another difficulty for manufacturing is their pricing difficulty. Indeed, these conditions are highly regressive and drive reductions in manufacturing output and force Lebanese manufacturers to reduce their profit margins. The steady adoption of the Sairafa rate back in 2022 as the new official rate across several economic transactions, including customs tariffs, implied that input cost pressures weren't expected to ease anytime soon. As the country's political uncertainty rumbles, coupled with the central bank's depletion of foreign currency reserves, a continuous depreciation in the currency is expected. Pricing strategies are also affected by the hyperinflation, by inventory imbalances, by supply chain disruptions and inefficiencies in high shipping costs for manufacturers. There's also a lack of bank credit lines, of course, which negatively impacted the investment growth for Lebanese manufacturers. Getting fresh dollar was a main challenge for them, and the banks were giving no facilities for, after informally adopting strict capital controls, ceasing lending, and severely limiting all withdrawals from dollar accounts. Also, there was an unclear and chaotic nature of support and subsidies from the government, which have created bottlenecks for manufacturers, especially subsidies related to importing fuel, which was already initially an already unsustainable scheme which depletes foreign reserves. Moving to employment and wages, Lebanese manufacturers are suffering from also, again, labor shortages, and the reasons are fourfold. There is an unbalanced labor market, high immigration rate among the skilled labor force needed for middle-level management in manufacturing, a skills gap, and a lack of young professionals with an interest in the technical and mechanical work in the manufacturing. Some of these challenges might be temporary, others might be structural. So, recruiting and retaining skilled employees is harder now, especially for smaller manufacturers who are less able to adapt to the shifting labor market situation. As I mentioned already in the first panel, according to the Global Talent Competitive Index of 2022, Lebanon ranked 80 out of 100 countries below Mongolia and Cambodia in the ability to attract talent, and scored below Egypt and Sri Lanka in the lower middle income countries in vocational and training skills, which is very important to the manufacturing sector. Also, a large number of employees have voluntarily left their jobs in the manufacturing sectors, searching for better opportunities and wages elsewhere. Moving to the decaying infrastructure, manufacturers have faced challenges, energy challenges, the failure of the main grid, and the need to rely on private diesel generations or generators or renewable energy, which have become very expensive. Such infrastructural deficits take an additional toll on manufacturers' bottom lines, driving an increase in costs, unreliable delivery times, and higher inefficiencies. Some manufacturers, as we saw from our closed experts roundtable, have decided to move their production to UAE or Oman or other countries, providing incentives, mainly due to the lack of electricity in the country. So still, while the integration of renewable energy sources is helping, some manufacturers, participants in our roundtable revealed that they are operating under 40% capacity, even with generators and renewable energy, mainly due to the absence of a main grid. Also, political dynamics and our region, of course, this always impacts industrial growth. The Syrian crisis since 2011, the most recent crisis, political crisis with the GCC countries, along with the lack of political support, the Lebanese manufacturing sector is not capable of adapting fast enough to cope with regional export challenges, the barriers to export and market access, limitation of transit exports through borders, lack of access to larger Arab markets. For example, the Association of Lebanese Industrials revealed that the Saudi ban has directly hit around $150 million worth of exports, though their initial target for 2022 was to move to $500 million in export to Saudi Arabia. So still, I don't like to say the negative things, but we need to state the facts as they are. But of course, there are opportunities offered by the crisis. Industrial production in Lebanon has first enormous potential for job growth. If the right circumstances are present, it can boost exports. The manufacturing industry can create sustainable jobs, further expanding an economic sector that contains already around 200,000 employees. And each job, many academic studies reveal that in developing countries and in countries similar in context to Lebanon, each job created in the industrial sectors creates 2.5 jobs in other economic sectors. So the limited opportunities emerging from the crisis are tied to lowered labor costs, which tend to be ongoing, at least for the short run, because wages in economic theory are fundamentally sticky in the short run. It is one of the main production costs for Lebanese manufacturers is labor. Employee salaries are mostly being paid in Lebanese pound. Now, of course, there are some adjustments with additional benefits. It differs among firms in the private sector. So Lebanese manufacturers can take advantage by hiring more workers and increase the quantity of output supplied, at least in the short run, can benefit from lower customs fees and taxes. And there's an opportunity in the increased local demand. Some opportunities might also exist in sourcing some raw materials locally. Currency depreciation makes foreign products more expensive. Many households in Lebanon are paid in Lebanese pound, which is altering consumer preferences towards local alternatives. Reducing the reliance on imports for local consumption can encourage local production at a microeconomic level and help reduce the country's trade deficit at the macro level. There's a higher export potential. Again, I leave it to our experts to address. Some evidence can be derived by the product space analysis conducted initially by LCPS, also updated by the USAID. Opportunities need to be leveraged by way of two key dimensions: distance to existing capabilities and product complexity. There's room for growth in several areas where the country has comparative advantage. We mention manufacturing areas like vaccines, blood, anti-seratoxins, washing and bottling machines, textile products and articles for technical use, motor vehicle parts and accessories, and high-tech manufacturing, and other heating machinery. Of course, such opportunities exist in targeting also new geographical destinations, which offer opportunities such as the US, the Netherlands, France, Mexico, and Slovakia based on product space analysis. Of course, academic-industrial partnership in this regard also can create sound opportunities. Overall, export potential opportunities exist and vary along the product lines. However, it's essential to identify them and move in that direction. Also, there are opportunities in young manufacturers. Young firms and startups are the engines of job creation in Lebanon. Reflecting on a 2010 data report from the World Bank, micro startups in manufacturing accounted for 177% of aggregate net job creation, and generated around 66,000 jobs between 2005 and 2010. So there's an untapped potential for new manufacturers. I'll move to highlight some policy recommendations. First, there is need for manufacturing in Lebanon to focus on some key sectors where profitability and export potential are plausible. This can be done by looking at the product space analysis and attempting to incrementally increase the complexity of the products manufactured in Lebanon. For example, some studies suggest focusing on boosting electronics manufacturing, while others propose advancing production of medical lab supplies. Lebanese manufacturers can embrace the results of these studies and partner with research institutions to update and refine the findings in light of the ongoing crisis. Of course, some new government regulations are needed. The LCPS roundtable experts stressed the need for improved governmental regulations and policies, including instituting a new tax and customs policy that gives manufacturers a competitive advantage over imported products, revisiting trade agreements to ensure the benefit of local manufacturers while not being too restrictive on imports to keep local high-quality products competitive. Also, adopting a more genuine approach to controlling illegal smuggling, both via border control and subsidy policy, creating incentives for operating in industrial zones by way of improved infrastructure and low property and municipal taxes for manufacturers. Also, energy remains a key challenge, and with many industries located in the greater Beirut area, the potential of benefiting from renewable energy becomes challenging due to limited space for solar panels. Adopting microgrid solutions to connect to other organizations and even residential units can be beneficial. The government can at least contribute to easing up the electricity crisis by opening up the grid, where it takes on the role of managing the grid, while it allows private businesses to generate and sell electricity to the grid. For example, a solar farm in Bekaa can generate power for factories in Beirut and Mount Lebanon. So I'll stop here and we'll continue.
Thank you. Thank you, Bassel and Lina, for such an informative presentation. You kind of addressed all the major angles and challenges and opportunities for this important sector. Before I introduce our esteemed discussants for this session, I'm gonna just take a minute to comment on a couple of things. So the first one is the chart, the figure that you showed about revenues declining between 2012 and 2015. So even before the crisis, we see that the sector was not doing so well. But again, I think here we need to take into consideration tax evasion, because also, as we know, the informal sector has been growing, throughout the last 10 years, and as the ILO reports show, we are at around, I think, 62% in terms of informality. So again, this aspect, I think, deserves more attention. I hope we can discuss it. Taxes, how they affect, the sector, incentives for tax evasion, and so on. So this is extremely important. The second point I would like to highlight is the export sector. I think, even before the crisis, Lebanon is a very small country, so very few sectors would really thrive without, exports. And after the crisis, we have seen also the drastic reduction in purchasing power. So again, there is some substitution. So people maybe have, substituted local-made, goods for foreign-made goods, but again, their purchasing power is so low that I think, focusing on trade policy, the last slide that you showed, trade policy and how to make exports and imports easier because you need to import raw material, how to make it less costly, more, easier without removing barriers and so on is a very important point as well. So I'll go ahead and introduce our discussants. We have with us, Paul, I'll start with the ladies. Rima Freji is the chairwoman of Tanmiya Lebanon and a board member and chief corporate governance officer of Wadi Holdings, SAE, in Egypt. In parallel, she leads performance optimization, top team leadership development, corporate governance, and corporate restructuring initiatives across the group. She is a founding member and president of the Lebanese Private Sector Network, a board member at the Syndicate of Lebanese Food Industrialists, and serves on several other local and international associations. Welcome, Rima. I'll introduce next Joanne Karkour. With a master's in economics and a DESS in management of telecommunications, Joanne is an innovative and results-driven creative entrepreneur and strategic business development manager, leveraging over 25 years of experience to drive growth and transformation within small and medium-sized enterprises. Expert in developing and elevating brands, orchestrating strategic changes, thriving in challenging situations, and improving the bottom line. Joanne's professional journey is not just about achieving business milestones, it's a holistic approach that integrates her passion for the environment, sustainability, leadership, and a well-rounded, healthy life. Eager to continue contributing to the business landscape while maintaining a deep connection with the world and its diverse wonders. Founder and partner at Fairtrade Lebanon and Fairtrade and Tourism Lebanon, Joanne is currently the executive director of FTTL. Welcome, Joanne. And Paul Abinasser is an industrial entrepreneur and the chief executive officer at Polytextile. He is also a member of the board of directors at the Association of Lebanese Industrialists, ALI, where he additionally chairs the Industrialists Assembly of Kisrwan. So welcome, Paul. I'll give the floor over to you to comment on the presentation and any further ideas or recommendations that you might have. Thank you. So let's start with Paul. Let's do the reverse.
Outnumbered today. We have to take care.
Yeah. I'm not sure it's working. Yeah, it's working. Basically, I took a look at the report. I've placed a couple of notes here and there. I think there are some information that needs to be maybe addressed a bit differently. And then looking at what kind of recommendations we can have. Truly, of course, those recommendations are valid for sure. But I want to be much more aggressive than that. So basically, the issue right now is that if we want an industrial sector that's vibrant in the country, we need to set, first of all, goals that are attainable. Okay, I'm all for export promotion, and that's basically one of the main pillars at the Association of Lebanese Industrialists. But before that, there is a much easier goal that achieves even better results, which is import substitution. And the reason for that is that we have a huge import bill. We do not want that import bill to just decrease. We want to have less imports or more, let's say, products that we produce locally, so that eventually we grow the economy more and we import more. There's no issue with that. The issue is not how much we're importing. It's how much we're importing versus how much we're exporting versus how much we're producing. So looking back at this, we have to think, okay, what are the issues? In the report, we're looking at energy. Okay, perfect. There are issues with the energies. So what are we going to do about it? The idea of waiting for the government to solve it is not going to make it. So we need to have a practical, pragmatic proposal to table. One of the proposals we're tabling is basically decoupling the industrial cities and the industrial areas from the national grid. Decouple them, allow us to produce our own energy, so you can come in, have a small-scale producer of energy, independent power provider, who will provide that energy on the whole area. Then you could have, when you have that microgrid, you can couple to it any kind of solar or renewable energy, because then you can have actual lines that will take you a bit far. Going to the example that was given, which is basically produce in Bekaa and sending it back to Beirut, this can only be achieved once we have 24/7 electric grid, because you would need to do power wheeling, and this means you would have to have energy on the grid 24/7. So that's definitely a goal. But to start with, let me do something else. Let me identify in every single area where is the closest place where I can deploy my solar panels, okay, to provide power only to that area. So you solve the problem like this. You go step by step. On the vocational training, this has also been identified as an issue, and it truly is an issue. We need the paradigm shift. In Ali, we have done a complete policy proposal regarding that. I happen to lead it. And what we're approaching is a completely different approach. It's not changing curriculum here, fixing how we're teaching there, or providing more equipment to that school here. It's actually changing the whole approach. So going towards an approach where we're hybridized, where our students are embedded in our manufacturing facilities, and not just the manufacturing. This can apply to all the other sectors. We need those students to be embedded in the workplace from day one. And if you do that, you go into the apprenticeship model, where you're hybridizing between apprenticeship at work and actually getting teaching at the school and getting paid. So you're solving many, many problems at the same time. So there are options when it comes to this, but we have to be really aggressive. We cannot just wait for the government to, fix their Director General, their DGVET, which is basically the entity that's supposed to be taking care of the vocational training, which has one purpose and one purpose only, making sure that there are enough exams, so there are enough people who are correcting those exams and getting paid. So it's a self-funding mechanism that gets nowhere. I'm not going to dwell too much because I want to leave the floor to others, but regarding the decrease in manufacturing revenues, there is one more point. We're talking about the financial part, but there is something very, very, according to our studies, the main reason why it decreased was the crisis in Syria. You had closed borders. 2011, your borders closed. So your ability to send products on the cheap to all the GCC going through Iraq and Syria was done overnight. And this is a huge, huge cost difference. I'm going to give you an example to that. We produce in Lebanon, and there are people producing in Turkey. When you're trying to sell to Europe, they have a huge advantage. There is the roads, and so they can have trucks that can actually deliver the goods to multiple points all the way as they're going from Turkey to France. They could deliver to that company's warehouses in Germany, in Czechoslovakia, and all the way. And it makes a huge difference. Whereas for us, we have to send it with one container, goes all the way by shipping, by sea to another point, and then the difference in cost is substantial. So this is something of an advantage we had in the area here, because you could ship your products from Lebanon with a truck that would stop in Jordan, in Syria, in Iraq, and deliver products along the way. This is huge and made a huge difference. If you plot both of them, when we lost the ability to use the land connection, and that you see it's immediately correlated. So these are kind of the things we had. One more point is also this is a mistake that I asked to be fixed in the report regarding the exports. We do not have 17% of exports of jewelry. This is not it. What we are exporting is gold, and we do not produce gold. This is just a scheme to be able to get money out of African countries for those who are living there. So we need to make sure every time we look at our import and our export bills, we need to take away this section, because it screws up everything, because it's massive. It's 1.2 billion, it's not taxed. There's no VAT on it, there's no customs on it, just transit through Lebanon. And I'm not saying we should do anything about it, because this is a major, major important thing for the country. But we cannot just estimate that this is exports, unless someone has a gold mine in Lebanon I don't know of. So I'll leave it to that, and we can take it later.
So yeah, again, commenting on your points, Paul, yeah, I think we should separate exports where there is some value added in the country versus exports that, you know, products that were just transiting through the country. But again, emphasizing the role of exports, as you said, when we looked at those figures, I suggested it might be partly tax evasion, but again, your point is, you know, makes sense. So it was the increase in transportation costs that decreased exports that negatively impacted our manufacturing sector.
The cost. You have to think about the fact that some products cannot be deployed besides in this way.
Right,
or else you're going to go for air freight, which is mind-boggling more costly. So it's not a matter of an increase, a slight increase in cost or 20 or 30%. It became impossible.
But yeah, that's a very valid point to explain the decrease. Again, something you mentioned, what was the point that you made before? Oh, yeah, I think the first point that you made, if I understand it correctly, and making sure that the audience understand it, you're not in favor of the traditional protectionist measures. So you're not advocating for banning imports to protect your industry or anything like that.
Yeah.
You are in favor of support that would help your sector, but without, because as we all know, when we protect the protectionism, you know, the traditional one, when you protect certain goods and products, what happens, and all studies have showed this, is that the quality goes down because there is no longer any competition, and the prices go up because there is no longer any competition. So I would assume you're proposing other ways, alternative ways of support, right?
It's good we touch on that, but let me just say something. When it comes to customs, because this is a really, really very thorny issue, what we need to do is prevent dumping. That's a very big difference. The problem in Lebanon is not that we need protectionism. No. What we need to make sure is that there is no illegal or, let's say, unfair competition. I'm going to give you an example. If you look at the textile sector, okay, if you look at a country like Turkey, Turkey subsidizes its exports. So basically, a company is subsidized to the tune of 15% cash back when they export. So they literally can sell at cost because they're going to get 15% cash back on their exports. Okay. So what we need to do is making sure that only that 15% is covered. So you do your customs and you do your and what we're proposing now is something which is already available, but we need to expand it, which is a rasm al-nawa'i. This is basically setting a certain minimum, not increasing the percentage you pay on your customs, but a minimum, because what's happening is basically evasion. So people will come in, under-invoice their products, and instead of paying the fair 10, 12, 5, 6, 7, 8% on the customs, they would under-invoice it, end up paying 0.5%. So 0.5% means that a company producing in Turkey would send their products to Lebanon, get subsidized 15%, pay no customs or barely no customs because they're under-invoicing, and flood the market. By the time anyone reacts, if anyone ever reacts, okay, all the companies are dead. This is what happened systematically for the past 20 years. So by setting a minimum, by saying, you know, a piece of clothes a jacket is minimum $20, $30. This is something that can be discussed in the private sector between importers and producers. And it is taxed 10%. So the minimum you're going to have is $2 of taxes on it. So whatever you try to say about how much you paid for the product, it will be taxed at $2. This is what we need, which is basically protect from dumping and not do protectionism, which is different, completely different thing. I'm going to end up in one thing. Do you know how much we import in used clothes? $60 million a year. I challenge anyone to find a single piece of used clothes in Lebanon. It does not exist. So basically, everything is imported under use clause because you pay zero taxes. It's bagged in bulk, vacuum bagged, and they're selling them in Lebanon. So this is what you need to work on.
Lack of enforcement, in other words, you know, because this has rules, laws. They're doing it illegally. Okay, so I think, this is a discussion that can go on for hours, but let's turn next to Rima. Rima, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Do I have to, or does this work? Okay. All right, I'm going to just share some stories. Basically, I'm going to share my experience in Tanmiya, which is chicken, and then also into advocacy. and how bringing them together made a lot of sense. So before the crisis, as you rightfully said, we were already suffering from lack of policy prioritization for the productive sector in general, whether they are agriculture, agri-food, or manufacturing. And already a lot of companies were considering shutting down because we could not see that the country was competitive enough for us to invest more and grow. And then the crisis came, and there was the small window of opportunity. Part of that window of opportunity has to do with the fact that the purchasing power dropped with the devaluation of the currency, and then there was an interest in import substitution. And interestingly enough, also there was suddenly a favored look at Lebanese products, you know, part of that nationalism that kind of arose. And that really benefited a lot of companies that started innovating, bringing back the flair of Lebanon, creating new recipes, etc. And I think that brought also some energy in the youth. So that was kind of good, and a lot of NGOs and civil society organizations were supporting innovation and growth in the local food. But at the same time, and of course you had the deleveraging with the banks, I don't know if I mentioned that. So here, the sector has a lot of potential. We created this small window of opportunity with a drop in overheads, with a passing of subsidies that passed for a short period of time, gave us a bit of elan, let's say. However, you still have no access to finance, so if you want to grow and continue growing, you cannot. And whatever financing mechanisms that were being offered were extremely expensive and with guarantees that were a bit ridiculous to go for. The high energy cost in Tanmiya, we reached almost 70% of our overheads at some point in time. And the solar energy funds that were being created were either too small or too late in our story. So we went ahead with it on our own. And today, basically, the only opportunities we see is in absence of access to finance, potentially some private equity investment could be the way for us to grow because there's still potential in the sector. In our sector today, we employ 20,000 families. And if we were given the opportunity, we could reach 30 and 40,000. This is a huge potential for the only protein that is currently locally produced in Lebanon, with self-sufficiency. So there is potential. So in absence of access to finance, we just installed biomass, which is producing energy through chicken manure. And finally, it's working. We installed solar energy. So we're trying to reduce our costs. But what would make it better, of course, is access to finance and favorable policies. Now, my other chapter in my life is advocacy and pressure. We started the Lebanese Private Sector Network about 2.5 years ago. We're on our 3rd year now. And basically, we came together as a group of business people and professionals to protect the formal economy. And as you rightfully said, you have the rise of the informal economy with all its problems of unfair competition, unfair labor competition, and a lot of businesses that are simply evading taxes while you're trying to stay as a lawful citizen and good businesses. So one side is protecting the formal economy with a lot of conditions that are political and economic, including sovereignty, customs control, border control, decentralization to bring down the power to the municipality level so that can encourage growth. All of it coming from an economic perspective. And we created a team that works on policy and advocacy. And the second part is while we're waiting for the government to get its act together and start functioning and for us to be able to impact with the demands that we have, we focused on promoting sustainability and growth through creating a platform called Lebanon Works. And Lebanon Works is all about highlighting initiatives by employers or educators or business enablers that are showcasing how it actually works in Lebanon. What we noticed is there's duplication of policies, there's duplication of initiatives, there's duplication of trainings of some sort that might not be needed. So by bringing all the good things and the good initiatives together, we might reduce duplication, increase collaboration, and start bringing awareness to people of what exists. So companies will know more about the education initiatives that are being created. Education institutes will know more about the businesses that need it. Investors will know about potential sectors. So it's bringing all that energy and trying to get out of the causes of the crisis and more into what are we doing while we are still in crisis. So this is one of the things we've done. We've done events, we've done policy asks, of which industrial policy asks as well, in collaboration with LCPS. And the idea is, approaching the coming year, is to try to take policy asks and recommendations into more practical, actionable items. So of these, I'm going to highlight for you a few that relate to the manufacturing sector. One of them that we're recommending strongly, and we're going to see how to develop this year, actually, potentially in the collaboration with LCPS again, is how can we put in place a national manufacturing strategy that tackles increasing employment and improving our GDP, and being able to get rid of this issue that we have, all of us manufacturers have it, and especially those in agriculture as well. You hop from one ministry to another and nobody is aligned. So you go to the Ministry of Agriculture, they tell you one thing, you go to the Ministry of Industry, it's another, finance is another, economy is another, and you find yourself constantly lobbying. Why? Because there isn't a national strategy, neither for job creation nor for manufacturing or productive sectors, that unifies them all and say, all right, so these are the categories we need to, and I would insist on this, protect for a short period of time, not a long period of time, in order to give them the boost to create, because we are able to produce them efficiently and with quality. These are the things that we simply cannot do, so let's stop delving, trying to direct people, investors, and those that are currently producing, what to keep going at, what to reduce doing, and the same thing for the importers, what to keep importing, what to import less of, more of. So there has to be a strategy around this that is based on what is this new competitive model of Lebanon? Where will Lebanon be after the Israel-Gaza round and after the several rounds that are going to come our way, and hopefully not? Where can we be competitively in the region? So this kind of study needs to take place. And with that, universities, companies, investors, funders all know finally where to go, you know, and what to support. The second aspect is, and again, back to the protection. Why is protection important? Maybe the word is wrong, but we need to find another word. Our food security is at stake. It is at stake almost all over the world. But in Lebanon, when we consume 80% of our food, and at any point in time, we are in an insecure region. Look at what we're going through right now, and imagine 2006. In 2006, we reached a point where we couldn't feed the chickens because the Israelis were bombing the trucks that were transporting feed to the chickens. And we had to just make do with whatever we still had in our freezers to supply the supermarkets that had no more protein. It reached that level in a month. So when your port is bombed and your airport is bombed, and when you need to think this way, we need to secure our country with a bare minimum self-sufficiency. I'm almost done. And I think, hopefully, if Paul can get to talking a little bit more about the National Vocational Education Plan that Ali had proposed, because this is a critical element. Sorry, I spoke too much, maybe?
Thank you so much. Lebanon Works sounds like a great initiative. So again, you mentioned how many workers you employ. Yes. But I mean, in total for manufacturing, let me just say this. We conducted a study funded by the National Endowment for Democracy, and we surveyed 131 families, households, who have at least one person working in one of 7 sectors. And one of the sectors was manufacturing, and we found out that those in manufacturing fared very well. That was during the crisis, that was in 2022. So they were much less impacted than people who worked in, for example, agriculture and construction didn't do well. So manufacturing really, you know, I think it, in terms of salaries, in terms, you know, of their, you know, increasing their salaries or retaining their benefits or whatever it is, you did a great job as a manufacturing sector. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Then let's turn to Joanne and have your views on this. Thank you.
So basically, our business model is a bit different than the other industries. We come from an NGO background. So our idea is to equip mainly women co-ops and SMEs and to keep them in the rural areas. And so we source the finest of their products from different areas, from north to south, and we transport them all to we have a small facility in the Bekaa, where we quality control, we label, we package, we palletize, and up to containers. So basically 99.9% of our business, especially since 2019, is export. Still, we have the same problems other industries are facing and that Rima mentioned. Access to finance, okay? So we're working on super tight cash flow management. Really, it's tough. If you want to grow, we cannot grow. If we need to buy more machinery, we cannot do this. If we want to actually to access market, and this is the edge Fairtrade Lebanon has on other NGOs, is that the co-ops, the SMEs, we're equipping, we're training. We do a lot of training, a lot. So what we provide, this added value we provide to the co-ops, is that we're offering them access to market. So you have the pomegranate molasse of a smallest, poorest co-ops in Dakar that is used by a Michelin star chef in France. You have eggplant, stuffed eggplant from Ka, which is a very remote region in Lebanon that is sold at Gourmet Lafayette or at Le Bon Marché. Our brand is Terroir du Liban. It's sold in more than 250 specialty stores in France, in addition to Gourmet Lafayette and Grande Épicerie, which are the finest stores there. Still, it is inexpensive. Like, not only we have to rely, let me step to energy, okay? Energy, we have a lot of transportation costs because every day we have to tour, to go to co-ops, collect the goods, to bring them to our Bekaa facility, and to re-quality check. We pay a lot on standards, on the contrary of the study. We pay a lot on lab tests. It's very important to know that France is becoming very, very picky concerning quality. So systematically, especially if it's organic food, systematically every container is stopped and is recontrolled. So we have to pay a lot more. We sometimes have to lab test, not in Lebanon, but to lab test it in like Cyprus or other countries to make sure the quality is okay. So this is additional costs that we're paying. We have high standards since we're fair traders also. So we have high standards at our facility units. We also have control of transparency, equity, and quality at the co-ops we work with. So these are all extra costs that we are paying for. Now, there is definitely an interest for our products, okay? Even if we're a small enterprise, we lately displayed our goods at Anuga, which is one of the biggest food fairs in Europe. We were there with big Lebanese food industrialists, and we found a real interest for products with stories behind. So we had a big interest for our goods. Still, if we want to grow, we have this financial issue. We cannot grow more. We have limits to growing where we have to buy it all in advance. Since we're fair traders, we pay all co-ops. Okay, one other thing I want to mention is that we commit to pay fair wages and fair prices, but prices are growing drastically. which means like last year, they increased, basically work on seasonal, okay? So like in 2022, they doubled their prices. We said, okay, it's about energy, they're paying it more. But this year as well, whereas France, which is our biggest market, is going through an inflation. So we committed to our distributor in France not to increase the price, but to bear the increase of our local suppliers. So we're reducing margins. And seriously, I cannot understand why they are increasing their prices that much. And this is why we're not that competitive. So Turkey is offering way better prices. So when you see our products at Le Bon Marché, you can see the same product from a Turkish origin at half price. Greece is offering also very competitive prices. So these are somehow the challenges. Still, I'm convinced there is an opportunity to grow and to export.
Thank you, Joanne. So maybe, I don't know if Lina or Basil, you have any, comments on what has been discussed. Would you like to go ahead? Yeah. Thanks.
It's working. Yeah, it's working. So first, I would like to thank Paul for the very illuminating insights, especially on the Syrian crisis, which we kind of missed. I want to talk about the energy that Paul mentioned. I think one impediment for energy is the issue of the lack of industrial zones. I mean, a few years ago, I went on visits to several manufacturers. Many of them are in Mount Lebanon, and many of them are like in residential areas. So industrialists need to put some effort into relocating into industrial zones where these renewable energy or kind of even microgrid solutions would work. If each one of them is located in a neighborhood, it will not work. It will not work, basically. So that's on the energy part. The issue of vocational training is very interesting that Paul raised. And at some point at AUB, Faculty of Engineering, we tried to see if we can help in that. There was the issue that we train engineers, and manufacturers don't need engineers. They need like vocational workers, people with skills. And really, there's a lack of schools that do this. So like Paul said, there might be really a need to create new kind of schools where students spend maybe 6 months in the school, 6 months on hands-on training, and they graduate with a job. And maybe what Paul mentioned is the incentive would be that when you graduate, you get a job, but you're not going to become rich, but you will have a decent salary, which might be better than leaving the country to make a few pennies more. Okay, so that's for what Paul mentioned. For Rima, I want to say that the poultry sector has been doing exceptionally good in Lebanon. A group of my students now was working with one of your competitors, and we're impressed with the technology and what's happening there. And I think the issue of food security you raised is very important, and the government and the financiers of this country should look beyond just the money, So you mentioned the issue of lack of financing, and also Jawan mentioned that also. I think there's lots of venture capitalist money in this country, but their objective is to fund a startup, maybe on pizza delivery, that will start in Beirut and then move to San Francisco. I think we should convince them that no, if they invest some money here, they might make less money, but they make this country a better place on the long term. Because what's happening now is most VC money is going into technology, which eventually wants to leave the country, Which I think we should make more effort to convince them to stay with us over here. Finally, on what Joanne mentioned, the issue of testing the quality of food and what's happening in France. Yes, I mean, I go to the US frequently, and I ask people there, why don't you have Lebanese food? The main reason is that they lack the FDA approval and these things. So again, as universities, we could put some effort into basically helping the small and big manufacturers developing products of high standards and exporting those. Okay.
Rima, you want to go ahead? Yeah.
One more comment concerning the vocational training. With such a high unemployment rate that we have today, and this is why I focused a lot on this national strategy, but I think maybe we can call it a national job creation strategy. There's the technical aspect, which is how can we fix our vocational training system, and I think Paul can definitely share a lot about that. But there's also the cultural aspect, and I think we give up and say, the Lebanese doesn't want to do this job, واللبناني ما بيعمل سنجري, واللبناني ما بيعمل هيك. I would like hopefully find somebody to challenge this notion today with the increase in poverty, with the Lebanese feeling that they need to restore their dignity through work, with them constantly relying on their politicians to pay them off every time there's elections. I think we need to restore that culture. There could be a way of communication drive, there could be a way of real conversations that can happen with these people, because they are the core of what will build the manufacturing sector at the end of the day. المهنية، روح المهنية والزراعة is what ties you to your country, is what keeps you within your country and keeps your citizenship or شو بقولوا الوطنية. Yeah, it's kind of a national duty. So I would highly recommend, whenever we're talking about the technical aspect of training, to also look into that culture and see who of these NGOs and international organizations could help in this, to have this paradigm shift.
Thank you. I just have one small comment, and then I will open the floor to questions. Again, digitization, the role of digitization in manufacturing. I mean, especially when it comes to e-government. I had worked on a project, I think it was a year and a half or 2 years ago, at the Ministry of Industry. And if you want, the main idea was to have like an export hub, like one platform where anyone who wants to export would process all their paperwork, you know, all the required documents online digitally through this platform. And, you know, to try and implement this, we started with the first step. We thought, you know, why don't we digitize the Ministry of Industry? And, you know, we looked at what kind of paperwork there are, you know, documents and so on. And then finally, you know, after the study that we did, we found out that it only requires $75,000 to digitize the whole industry. And by the way, there was someone from Siren, I think, in the previous panel. So that was supposed to be a joint venture, a joint project with Impact. Siren, and it would have taken 3 months, whereby any manufacturer who wanted any document from the ministry doesn't have to go there. They would just submit it online and you know, print it out at the end. So again, just to mention the role of digitization in this sector. Thank you. So let's see what questions we have. Yes, please, can you go ahead?
سنية ياسين من شركة ميفوزا للسلامة الغذائية. أول شيء بحب أشكر الدكتورة لينا. أنا اطلعت على مقال لها حول موضوع التنمية الزراعية بلبنان. شيء لفتني كتير مهم لما ذكرت أنه لبنان رغم موقعه، رغم مساحته الصغيرة، إلا أنه عنده أكبر مساحة زراعية بالنسبة للدول العربية كبلد. يعني كمساحة زراعية عنده أكبر مساحة زراعية بين الدول العربية. هيدا الشيء بيدفعنا نتساءل انه ليش نحن ما عم نقدر نستثمر فيها. وهيدا الشيء ناقشناه نحن مع احدى الجامعات الاسبوع الماضي. كان في راوند تيبل بمنطقة عكار يلي دهشنا للمناطق اللي شفناها وللإهمال الموجود فيها. وعرفنا انه مثلا البطاطا المشهوره عكار بالبطاطا، والماكدونالد عمل دراسه على البطاطا العكاريه وطلعت هي النوعيه الممتازه اللي هن بدهم يستعملوها، ولكن بسبب المحسوبيات ممنوع انه يمشوا هيدي البطاطا، إضافة إلى عدم وجود رزنامة زراعية بين البقاع وعكار. المنطقتين بيزرعوا بطاطا، ما عم يقدروا في تنسيق، المي ما في توزيع مي مزبوطة. هاي بالنسبة كإحدى التشالنجز المشاكل.
عن الأجريكولتشر، سو كمان عن الزراعة رح يكون عندك اكسبرتس كمان.
إيه. بالنسبة لموضوع السلامة الغذائية، نحن بموضوع السلامة الغذائية المزارعين ما عم يلتزموا او ما عم في توعيه لحتى اللي يطبقوا الجابس، الممارسات الزراعيه الجيده ليقدروا يصدروا منتجاتهم. يعني وقت توقف المنتجات اللبنانيه على الحدود وبتترجع، ما عم تترجع لاعتبارات سياسيه، عم تترجع لانها ما مطبقه المعايير العالميه للتصدير. يعني المبيدات الحشريه، المي الملوثه، هيدي بتسيء لهم. اضافه الى انه وقت اللي بيكون في عنا فائض زراعي مفروض فيه بيروح على التصنيع، ما عم بيكون في توعية يروح على التصنيع. يعني نحن إذا كان عندنا زيادة بطاطا صار فينا من البطاطا عدا عن نعمل الشيبس صار فينا نعمل طحين، صار في طحين البطاطا، هذا بيساعد بصناعة الخبز. تيجي على موضوع التصنيع الغذائي، كمان عدم تطبيق المعايير العالمية للجودة ما عم بيخلي المصنع الغذائي انه يقدر يصدر. يعني بنلاقي في كتير مصانع على الاف دي اي ديتنشن ما قادرين يصدروا لانه ما عم بيطبقوا، لان صار في شهادات بتنباع بالسوق انه بيعطيه شهاده بيقول له هذه الشهاده، بيجي لحتى يصدر بيطلع منه مطبق المعايير. بقى هون بدنا نحن يكون في توعيه، يكون في توعيه وتعاون بين القطاع العام والخاص والجامعات. هدول الثلاث ركائز أساسيات للتعاون لحتى يكون في نقلة نوعية، إضافة إلى تقليل كلفة الزراعة والصناعة عن طريق صار في بالنسبة للزراعة الأكوابونيك والإيدرابونيك وبالنسبة للسولار بانلز. هذا كله بيساعد بتقليل الكلفة، إضافة لما بيكون المواطن أو المزارع عم يأكل شيء نظيف ما بقى يتعرض لأمراض، لأنه الكلفة الفاتورة الطبية أغلى بكتير من لما تشتري أنت منتج سليم. المدام عندهم التنمية، إذا واحد بيقول تنمية بياكل هو مغمض عيونه، مزبوط ولا لا؟ لما بتقولي تنمية بتاكلي أنت مغمضة عيونك، ليش؟ لأنه بتعرفي إنه هن مطبقين المواصفات. بينما بتروحي تشتري شغلة رخيصة رح تروحي تدفعي للدكتور وحق دواء أكثر من إنه لو اشتريتي المنتج الأصلي السليم. بقى بالنسبة كمان لموضوع قالت المدام على موضوع المهنيات، بالبقاع في مدرسة مهنية وإجاها تمويل أوروبي مفروض تخرج بالسنة بحدود 120 طالب، ما عم بتخرج 15 طالب بسبب الأمور السياسية. يعني ما بدنا ندخل بتفاصيل.
طب الياس تبع مدرسة طب الياس اللي هي انعملت مثل ما عم بتقولي، في شغله كمان بدنا ناخذها بعين الاعتبار. مش يعني كثير مرات بنحط الحق على السياسه، سوري رح اقولها، بس هي في كثير منها جحشنه، بالعربي مشبرح،
سوء اداره.
سوري
هن كمان
في سوء اداره، في
إدارة
جحشنه. يعني بار اكزامبل بيكون عندهم موتور بمدرسه ثانيه، هو مدارس رسميه، عندهم موتور بمدرسه ثانيه والموتور تبعهم مش شغال، لا المدرسه هيديك شغاله لانه هي اساسا مسكره، يعني الموتور بالمدرسه اللي مسكره والمدرسه اللي فاتحه ما فيها موتور. في اشياء سخيفه ما بتنعمل. بس انيويز
لانه ما في مراقبه وما في محاسبه.
بس تريحك بموضوع ابلياس. ابلياس هلا المشروع اتاخذ من قبل جمعيه الصناعيين وباقي ما بقى هلا اتاخذ المشروع، يعني اتفقنا معهم عم نحكي عن الدوله. سو بيزيكلي كنت عم بتقولي بدنا توافق ما بين منطقه القطاع الخاص والجامعات والدوله، لا بدنا توافق بين القطاع الخاص والجامعات والدوله تزيح من الدرب. That's all that we need.
ايه ما هن ثلاثه، انا عمال اقول انه ثلاثتهم يتفقوا مع بعضهم.
Okay, so I think what we can summarize from the intervention انه we cannot stress enough the role of quality control when it comes to food especially.
ضروري كثير مهم كفود سيكيورتي وكفود سيفتي، اثنيناتهم بيمشوا مع بعضهم
100%. I think في عنا غير دكتور مات عالم.
يلا very quickly اثنين comments سريعين. الأول له علاقة بال legal infrastructure لحماية الصناعة، موجودة من 2008 عندنا anti dumping law تستعمل ولازم تستعملوها، ومن 2022 عندنا competition law تمنع الاحتكارات. بالتالي صار في عندنا two pieces كتير مهمين ولازم على طول تفكروا تستعملوهم. هلا بالحكي عن industry and then energy, beyond the cost يلي لازم نفكر فيه, and I'm personally giving a lecture on this subject BCOP28 next week. The challenges لألكم entrepreneurs, board members, directors of industrial facilities and people involved in this. هو إنه by 2030, 40 and 50 there are 3 layers of things that will happen on climate change. The challenge will not be if you can produce and only healthy products. You will have to produce using a certain threshold of energy that is allowable to reduce carbon impact. This means that by 2030 يلي هو 6 سنين من اليوم معامل كبيرة بلبنان تشتغل بكذا نوع من الاجريكلتشر للتيشوز لاي شيء ثاني. اذا عم تستعمل heavily electricity جاي من fossil fuel او من مصادر غير efficient مثل الوضع اللي عندنا اياه بلبنان, they will not be able to export. اذا انت مصنع بتبيع الومنيوم لبي ام دبليو by 2030 and this will accentuate with time, بي ام دبليو ما حيشتري منك الالومنيوم تاعك. So this is a risk, بس هو huge opportunity لأنه أصلاً نحن ما عندنا cheap electricity. So إذا الإندستريالز ببلشوا يفكروا to substitute their electricity with green electrical hydrogen using all the systems that can be on micro or macro grids, they will not only gain energy source, but they will gain presence and they will be able to challenge and to compete better than other industries in areas that heavily depend on fossil fuel. So I had a huge way of thinking forward. I think it should be taken into consideration.
May I give you a reply?
Get a response quickly.
You want to get a
and then-
response on that?
Yes.
Okay. I have an hour because that's basically it. Now, just to be clear, one, just to give you an idea, the vast majority of large companies in Lebanon, manufacturers, are forced, they have been forced to go towards renewable energy when possible. But let's be very clear. Dr. Maddah Basel said المصانع موجودة بمناطق مناطق سكنية. مش مزبوط. هو السكن قرب على المناطق الصناعية. It was the other way around. So كانوا مناطق صناعية. But the result is the same. The result is basically عندك مصانع بمناطق سكنية. ما فيهم يظهروا. يظهروا بدك تعمل مناطق صناعية بعيدة مجهزة خالصة وتعمل land swap. But anyways, this is a different story. What I want to say with this is that في كتير مصانع بلبنان that are multi-storied. And therefore, the ability to deploy renewable energy is limited to a large extent. We're trying to figure it out with what we propose, which is basically when you look at an area and you bring in a solar farm which is close to it. أعطيكم an example, very simple example. خد منطقة زوق مصبح. أنا رئيس جامعة صناعية بكسروين, so I look over these places. زوق مصبح is typical case whereby كان في منطقة صناعية and basically المنطقة residential mushroomed around it. بس إذا ناخذ نحن المنطقة الصناعية بزوق مصبح and we have the right to actually نستجر الكهرباء من منطقة قريبة, okay, where we can put solar panels, then we can solve that problem. So that's one. Two, regarding alternative to that as well, is basically you do not need to go right directly from the dirtiest of fossil fuels, which is diesel and fuel oil, to hydrogen. And hydrogen, SSN, there's a big discussion about it, but that's a different story. But at the very least, if you go through LNG, already you reduce your footprint quite substantially. And if you couple LNG to solar systems, so you do 20%, your energy mix changes. There is one more opportunity, and I'll stop at that. What you're saying is totally true, and this is a huge opportunity for Lebanon. We're moving towards something called nearshoring. So basically, we're changing from the model of the 2000s, which was of outsourcing, which is go get your product as far as possible, مهم يكون أرخص شيء ممكن, to nearshoring, where the cost of how much carbon was used to get that product to the final consumer is calculated into the product. And since we are very close to Europe, a huge market, this gives us a unique opportunity to take advantage of that. So we have to take that into consideration. This is part of what Lebanon should be working on: nearshoring capacity, short batches, ability to change immediately, no more overproduction. This is no longer the logic going forward. Adidas, who produces 95% or 99% of their products in the Far East, right now are relaunching their plants, even in Germany, to be able to say, I want to produce just what I need, write what I need to follow up with the trends. We're in the Instagram era. We're in the 10 seconds of attention span era. So trends change, brands change, and so they end up with a huge amount of products that are unused because they buy in bulk, then trends change, they sell what they sold, move on to the next product, and so there is a lot of waste. They're trying to look at it differently, so nearshoring is that. So this is the whole thing. Thank you.
One more intervention. There was, yes, please. Okay. So two quick interventions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for this interesting discussion. My name is Soha Halab. I work with Baritak on a program called Lebanon Innovate. From this discussion and the discussion before, I noticed that the biggest challenges are mainly in the governmental framework and the legal framework. And I would like to ask a question for Ali, Monsieur Paul, and Madame Rima. Regarding you as collection of clusters and collection of companies, have you had any successful interventions towards those two frameworks, whether it's governmental or legal, or whether it's only related to the companies and exporting and such initiatives? If you can share any success story in infiltrating the government or the legal framework. Thank you.
Some examples.
محسن زين الدين من مؤسسة عامل. الحقيقة بالمحاضرات اللي عم تتقدم بعتقد انه في شيء عمال يتقدم لنا كحلول او مساهمة في امكانية ايجاد الحلول لهالمسائل. في شغلتين غابوا، كيف يمكن ان نشجع النقابات لهالمسائل هاي بالتحديد بهالقطاعات، يعني النقابات الصناعية بكل مجالاتها، وكيف نضغط باتجاه وزارة الاقتصاد انه تاخذ دورها جديا وزارة الصناعة. هاي السؤال الاول، اذا في اي يعني اقتراحات من هالنوع. الاعتراض الثاني على التعبير المحاضر، كان في بامكانك تقول هذا جهل قلة وعي، بس هذه الجملة كان يجب الا تذكرها على الاطلاق. شكرا.
I think we're out of time. If we can quickly respond to those two last interventions, and then we're going to break for lunch, I guess. Yeah.
Speaking on behalf of the network, what we did so we're starting our third year now, right? So the first year, what we did is build awareness of our existence and start being present in a lot of situations like this to learn and debate and put in our value. The second year, we started, so I would call the first year awareness, the second year more credibility, where we started getting invited and being asked our opinion by politicians and by people like yourselves here. So I feel that in our third year, we will be able to finally reach some action. And the action that we would like to get to is, having gone through a lot of these kinds of conferences, and I think we share a lot in common, is to take some of these policy demands and turn them into quick wins. Have there been wins? I think there has been enough pressure placed by people like us, people like Ali, and the syndicates, and the Hayat al-Iqtisadi, and RDCL, when we all say the same thing at the same time. This is kind of moving the needle. If you want to give other more exact, for example, right now with the budget, we're all mobilized, and I think we're going to get there, right?
Even last year's budget, there was some impact, right?
Of course. Basically, it's always an upward fight. We know that we know what we're up against. We're up against basically someone telling you that we're going to pass the budget by way of a Minister of Council resolution. You know, that's basically just saying this is mind-boggling. اختصار مجلس رئيس جمهورية ومجلس وزراء ومجلس نواب وأي أحد يسمع القطاع الخاص كلياته just by putting up a budget which is horrendous. And there are so many points I can't even start. But yes, we do have a lot of, let's say, unadvertised success, because once you advertise that success, immediately they will just do it, you know, to spite you. So we make sure that we do all of our advocacy behind the scenes, make sure we push as many levers as we can. Trust me, we can't talk about all of them, but if we didn't do that, you'd have much more at stake here. It's quite horrendous. The amount of documents that come through our offices that we have to amend, to have to fix, we have to do, is really mind-boggling.
Are there any last comments? If not, I want to thank the presenters, the panelists, discussants, the audience, and LCPS and the partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Leila, and thank you to all our panelists and discussants. And I would like now to please invite you for lunch, where the lunch is on the ground floor, and we will reconvene here, if I'm not mistaken, at 2:30. So please try to come back. I know it's a bit short notice because we went over by a few minutes, but so thank you again, and we'll see you shortly for the panel on healthcare.